Hey, good day, everybody, and welcome to your live event. My name is Eric Wynkoop, and I'm the Director of Culinary Instruction here at Ruby, and I'm also one of your instructors in the courses. I'd like to welcome you to my office hours today. This is your chance to ask questions about food and cooking, and my chance to do my best to respond to those questions. Before I jump into the questions that are already posted, you can see those on the right-hand side of your screen. I want to cover just a couple of quick housekeeping items. And the first one is, if you would like to more directly participate in today's event by posting a question or comment, I encourage you to do so. And on the right-hand side, upper right-hand corner of your screen, you will see a dialog box that says Add Question here. Go ahead and type in that question. It can be a comment as well, and that'll make its way to me or to the queue. And you can see that queue on the right-hand side of your page. And as you look at that, the list of questions that are already posed within the individual question dialog box in the upper right-hand corner, again, you'll see a heart-shaped icon. And if you would like me to respond to that question sooner than later, go ahead and click on that icon and it'll push that question up in priority. Okay. Otherwise, I will eventually get to your question. All right. So without further ado, let's go ahead and jump into today's program. And the first question I have here is, what do you think are the most essential skills or content for teenagers to learn who want to go into the food and beverage industry? Do you know of any good middle school curriculums? Let me first say that a list of essential skills and knowledge point for a teenager would be very much the same as somebody who may be a little bit older. And, with that in mind, let me first say that if you're interested in one of our courses, I think that's a great place to start. And I'll give you an example. We've got a teenage boy here at home, and he completed our FOK, the Forks Over Knives course, when he was in middle school. And he just wrapped up his freshman year in high school, and he's embarked on a baking course for the summer. The Forks Over Knives course is a 90-day course, which fits very nicely into an extended summer vacation period. And that can be a very good course to start or to start with, because it really covers the foundational points that really any cook needs to know to find success in the kitchen. And, I will also say that we have a number of teenagers, whether they're high school or middle school students, that are also enrolled in our professional plant-based certification course. I call it the Pro Plant course. And this one is twice as long. On paper, we schedule 6 months to complete that course. It too will reinforce foundational points, as well as go into a number of additional cooking subject areas when compared to the FOK course. And so if one has the time, the energy to tackle that larger course, that's a fine place to start as well. Do keep in mind that in our pro courses, not only are they longer and more in-depth in content, but in terms of our instructor expectations and feedback, we are shooting for a higher level of engagement and performance. Okay, so try to keep that in mind. As you consider what course might be appropriate. Otherwise, you're talking about knife skill development. We're talking about sanitation as a couple of key places to begin with. Most cooking school curricula will go into cooking methods, both dry heat as well as moist heat, followed by, other subjects like grain cookery, pasta cookery, or production if it's going to be fresh pasta, and sauce production, and then other areas, ancillary areas that might be a part of the focus of a particular cooking program. Okay, but do take a look at the table of contents of what we offer here at Ruby, and to see which duration of program, right, in terms of volume of content, might be best suited to your situation. But I think those two that I mentioned, Forks Over Knives, as well as Pro Plant, can be a perfect place to start for a middle schooler. All right, enjoy. Thank you. And next up from Marina. Hello. I need a crash course on the use of Silpat mats, the real ones. Mine have turned brown. Food does stick to them, and they don't clean up well. What am I doing wrong? Is parchment paper better? Aha. Well, I must say, I've got at least 2 or 3 darkened Silpat mats in the drawer downstairs in the kitchen. And, I'll say that over time, just, with regular use, those mats do tend to discolor, in my experience. And certainly higher temperatures will hasten the discoloration. And, I had the experience some time ago of using a Silpat mat for some high temp roasting. And in just one round of roasting with a brand new mat, I had this very dark brown mat as a result. And so I can attest to, some of the ways that you can hasten the discoloration of those mats. But so, just keep that in mind. The wear and tear does result in discoloration, but also higher temperature. With some of that, I find that certain foods will stick over time. And it's kind of like a nonstick pan, which over time accumulates micro scratches on the surface, eventually resulting in a sticky pan. So, be prepared to replace silicone baking mats periodically. Now, with that in mind, I will use some of my older mats for applications where sticking or not sticking, is not really a concern. For example, if I'm roasting vegetables or something else that will easily lift off from the mat without being damaged. And I have some newer mats and even a couple of brand new ones tucked away for macaron or for other applications where I definitely do not want things to stick. Okay, again, that's just part of the use and replacement of equipment in the kitchen. Okay, now in terms of cleanup, silicone baking mats tend to kind of hang on to oil, and it requires a little bit of rubbing and scrubbing. I use a fair amount of dish detergent and also a moderate coarseness scrubby sponge in order to clean those up as well as I can. And often it takes a couple of rounds of scrubbing to pull the oil off that surface. And so see how that works. Very often scrubbing with some coarseness, right, to the sponge will remove some of the residue that gets sort of built onto the surface. So you might find that on one hand, high temperature and prolonged use can discolor permanently the Silpat or the silicone baking mat, but in some cases it is food buildup that can be cleaned off with a scouring pad. Okay, and then to the last part of your question, Marina, about parchment paper. Parchment paper works well too, and like so many things in the kitchen, you're going to find cooks that have their own opinions about things, or own preferences, maybe I should say, about things. And I've certainly bumped into people that prefer parchment paper over silicone mats, at least in some situations, and some people that will, pretty much use only silicone mats. And I recommend giving it a try. That's often my response to any of my students when posed with choices. Give it a try in your situation, your context, and see which one you like. And you might find that you prefer strongly one over the other, or maybe it just depends on what you're producing. All right, thank you. All right, next question. This is a small business development question. Advice on starting a no storefront cake business, particularly tips on delivery. Yes, and so this sort of a question falls for me generally into the category of how do I start a business? And this is where I will suggest that you take a look at an online resource. It's of an organization called SCORE, SCORE.org. And SCORE is part of the U.S. Small Business Administration. And at SCORE, they have a number of business professionals or retired business professionals, with a specialization in really any number of industries, including food. And you can reach out to them for guidance. And within that context, I always recommend producing a business plan in order to help guide you through key questions that really should be addressed prior to opening your doors, so to speak. And there are resources at score.org to help you do just that. Okay. There's also a link that just popped up to a past live event where I talk about an aspect of food business, and that is the costing, the calculation of the food cost on recipes. And that's an essential step, and one that unfortunately many food business entrepreneurs skip over because it's kind of a tedious process. And it's kind of the antithesis of cooking, in terms of cooking being fun and costing being not so fun. But it is an essential step to take from the business perspective. And we need to calculate the cost of every ingredient based on the quantity used that goes into recipes, and then eventually calculate what the cost is on a single portion of that food being produced. And so if you're using a half teaspoon of vanilla, we need to calculate the cost of that half teaspoon of vanilla, for example. Okay, and so I just want you to be aware of some of these high-level topics that become important in this picture. Okay, as you get started with your business. And when it comes to delivery, I'm going to first of all recommend that you consider hooking up with a nearby catering company, and either going in for an informational interview, or even doing what we call a stage, which is a short-term period of work, very often at no pay, in order for you to learn about some aspect of the business. And there you might be able to address the concerns that you have around delivery. Okay, because that can really depend, the details can really depend upon where you are, the type of food you're serving, distances traveled, and other details. Okay, refrigeration, within the delivery vehicle might be necessary. And so on and so forth. Okay, so in order to address those details, again, I recommend that you team up with somebody in your locale to address those specific concerns that you have. Okay, thank you. And the next question is, if there's a lesson that we don't understand or have further questions for, how do we ask it? Aha. So we've got a couple of ways that we would like you to address questions that come up during your course. And one is, if you're on a particular task page and you have a question about some of the content on that task page, at the bottom of that page is a question and answer function. And you can ask a question right there in the task page, and that'll make its way to us, and we'll respond to your question. It'll be emailed to you as well as posted on that task page for others to see as well. Okay. Now, another way to ask a question, especially one that is maybe a little more peculiar to your situation, for example, or something that is maybe not related to task information directly, you can write us at support@ruby.com. And one of our team members here will get back to you. All right. Thank you. And let's see, another question. Is there an opportunity to get mentorship or anything like that? Here at Ruby, we do not provide mentorship per se, in terms of a one-on-one relationship, where we, guide a student through some of the details of cooking. But again, as I just mentioned, you have an opportunity to ask questions. We have a bank of many questions, probably on every task of our courses, where you can also look at past questions asked by students. And also take a look at our archived live events. We have many, many of them listed for your enjoyment. And some of them are office hours like the one you're engaged with here, where many different topics are touched upon, while other live events address particular topics. And so, you get to listen to the presenter talking about something in particular, okay? And so take a look at our archived events and see what you might find. All right, thank you. All right, Linda, I just signed up. Can you give suggestions for supplies for an aspiring chef? I know I need a chef knife, but what brand is good and what else do I need? I want to put together a cooking kit. I have basic things at home, but nothing professional quality. So, with our courses, especially the longer courses, we have suggested supply lists that will accompany that. And, I would recommend starting there. Each course is a little bit different based upon the content, of course, and tools and utensils will vary. I will also say that in terms of the quality that you might choose to acquire, you're going to need to do some further research, some further reading and sort of scouring the internet in order to see what your options are and what will best fit your situation, right, in terms of budget and storage space and the type of cooking that perhaps you envision yourself doing. All right. Now, when it comes to a chef's knife, there are many knives to choose from, but in that general category of chef's knife, right, that style of knife, which is your workhorse, there are many, many options on the market, as perhaps you have already seen. And again, prices can vary tremendously, and you can spend $1,000 on a single knife that's custom made, to fit your hand and be ergonomically correct and all those things, or you can buy something that is mass-produced. And even within the category of mass-produced knives, there are many different styles as well as quality points. Okay. So again, I would recommend that you do some reading. There are a lot of YouTube videos that address different brands of knives and do comparisons between different styles as well as quality points. Okay. And then finally, let me provide a suggestion. Okay. Something that you might consider. There is a brand on the market called Victorinox. And Victorinox is the Swiss Army knife people. All right. And they have at least a couple of different lines of cutlery. And there is at least one of those lines that is a good value in my experience. It's not considered a high quality knife in terms of its being handmade. It's very much a machine-made stamped steel blade and a molded hard rubber handle. So there's not a lot of cachet that goes along with this knife. Okay, but again, in my experience, and I do use one here at home on nearly a daily basis. They're easy to maintain. The metal alloy is hard enough to maintain the cutting edge for a reasonably long period of time. It's soft enough that it's pretty easy to sharpen yourself and otherwise maintain it. And it's inexpensive. A chef's knife depends on the size, but you can probably find something for $50 or $60 or so. Okay, and so that's one place to maybe start. And it's a small investment to start to get to know knives. And if you think you want to maintain your own knife in terms of sharpening, it's, I think, a good knife to use to practice on a whetstone as well, because it is inexpensive. Okay. And so those are a couple of things that come to mind. Enjoy the process and, take your time, in selecting equipment for the kitchen. You can certainly, ask questions here to us at support@ruby.com, as specific, issues or topics come up at your end. All right. Thank you. All right. Next up from Philip. How do I find my own style of cooking? I think as you continue to cook, all of your experiences converge, right, to in your own form of self-expression. And it's going to be, based upon your personality traits. It's going to be based upon your travels. It's going to be based upon your eating experience. And other experience handling certain ingredients and cooking methods. Things that appeal to you are going to rise to the surface. You're going to spend more time with those things, and then eventually, a certain style of cooking will have emerged. It takes time, and it takes the development of skill and the acquisition of knowledge. And again, all of these various and sundry components come together to form your style. And so, there isn't, a particular sequence of steps or a particular recipe to give you, but that's going to be a general approach of how things happen. And I would say, have patience with the process, enjoy the journey, and enjoy the human interaction that comes along with cooking, and listen attentively to the feedback that you receive on your food as well. Okay. And all the best in the kitchen. Thank you. All right. Next up. I'm so excited about this course. Do you recommend any courses once we finish this one? I'm interested in furthering my education in a plant-based lifestyle and Ayurveda. So Ida, if I'm not mistaken, you're enrolled in the Forks Over Knives course, okay, which is a great place to start. And once you have those foundational points in place, right? Both skill and knowledge. Then, here at Ruby, the next step to take is to consider the Pro Plant course, the Professional Plant-Based Certification course. And that's the 6-month course that I mentioned earlier in today's program. And it goes into more depth and more breadth, touching upon a number of different cooking areas within the plant-based world. Okay. And, as far as the Ayurveda component is concerned, to begin with, you can see that a couple of links just popped up to archived live events on Ayurveda. And so you might take a look at those to get started. And, in terms of Ayurveda and cooking, I would like to mention a couple of things, right? And number one, that I think it's important to acquire a solid foundation in the Ayurvedic principles, in the theory of Ayurveda. And then you can apply that to the cooking that you do, keeping in mind, of course, that Ayurvedic cooking fundamentally, right, needs to be tailored to the individual diner, the individual consumer. We can certainly produce Ayurvedic food on a broader scale, but at the end of the day, when service time comes, we do need to have a way to tailor it to the individual. And sometimes, or not just sometimes, but very often, we will do that through the use of garnishes and condiments to add cooling or heating elements or heavier grounding elements to the dish, for example. Okay. Another, idea is to take a look at the Ayurvedic Institute. And look at this. I happen to have my backup water here, right? That features the Ayurvedic Institute. That's in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And that's the school that was founded by Dr. Vasant Lad. And once a year, he's been offering a cooking seminar, and you might consider that, to get some foundations on, in this area of Ayurvedic cooking. Okay. I've also studied a bit of Ayurvedic cooking at the Chakrapani Clinic in Jaipur, in Rajasthan, in northern India. It's a clinic on one hand, but at the same time, an educational institute where you are able to tailor your course to fit your particular interests at that time, including cooking to some extent. And so that's another option. But there are books out there as well that will cover Ayurvedic cooking. And but again, as a foundation, please take the time to understand the theory of Ayurveda in order to most accurately then apply those principles to cooking. All right. Thank you. All right. Yeah, look at that. We've got a couple more links that popped up. Thank you, Patrick. One to the Ayurvedic Institute at ayurveda.com. And then also the Kripalu folks at kripalu.org. Please take a look at that. Thank you. And next question. Is there a way to know in advance what I will be required to cook during the course of certain tasks so that I would be able to stock all the ingredients ahead? I usually do my shopping once a week. Also, some ingredients might be rare and require research. Yes, so what we recommend for students is to look ahead in your tasks, jump ahead 2 or 3 or 4 tasks as needed to get to your next practice assignment, as well as your next instructor graded assignment. And take a look at the recipe options that are presented to you. Okay. Each student's journey will be unique through our courses. All right. In that, number one, we offer more than one recipe for practice or for an assignment. And then also, based upon individual needs, right? Whether it's a food allergy or a religious prescription or something else, students will often make substitutions, ingredient substitutions in a recipe. And then, of course, we have things like local availability, seasonal availability, to consider. And so please consider looking ahead, again, 3 or 4 tasks or so to figure out which route you will take and how much food you need to buy for the particular recipe that you'll produce. All right, thank you. And from Rebecca, what storage containers do you recommend for freezing meals and foods? I use both plastic and glass. I think both of those are reasonable materials to use. But again, like so many things in the kitchen, folks have their own opinions and ways to approach this. I've come across, many people that don't want to use plastic, and so they focus on glass containers exclusively. So think about, where you lie, in that discussion. But, if you look at online or at many stores, you will find glass containers with tight-fitting lids, these some snap-on lids. There are also plastic containers of a similar design. I also use, in the restaurant industry, what we call deli containers. And deli containers come in various sizes. I tend to use 1 pint and 1 quart container sizes. Those work well for us here at home, but they come in other sizes as well. And they also have accompanying lids that will fit those containers. And so you might consider that. You can find deli containers online, as well as at a restaurant supply store. So depending on where you live, just check out the availability of a local or nearby restaurant supply store, many of which are open to the public. And you can find food as well as non-food items, such as deli containers. Thank you. All right, next up. How do you learn how to salt to taste? I am definitely bad at that. I must have a terrible palate. I always add too much. How do you decide when you've added enough salt before the dish winds up tasting salty? Aha. So let me first say that practice makes better. Okay. So, following your logic here, Catherine, I could say, for example, that I'm terrible at the piano, and I'm also a terrible basketball player. But only because I haven't practiced, right? I mean, I haven't been introduced to the fundamentals, the principles, and I haven't put in the time to learn how to do it. And so these various aspects of cooking, including the seasoning of food, right, the adjustment of salt in this case, is just another example of that, right, where some focused practice will get you there. But of course, you're asking for a little bit more context. So let's talk about this. When it comes to salt, this is a great question, really. And I recommend that you really focus, really concentrate on what you're experiencing on the palate before you add any salt, during the process of adding salt, okay? And then pay attention to where you start to approach this point where the food is under-seasoned one moment and then tastes good the next moment, and then quickly rolls over to over-salted in the next moment. Okay, and it's a small point or a fine line if you really want to get picky about it. And I recommend that you do, okay, because that's going to just make your food better at the end of the process, okay? But it really requires practice. And It requires silence, no televisions, no conversation, just engaging with the food and what it is that your palate and your brain, right, are picking up. And really, as you add a little pinch of salt and you stir it in and taste again, notice the change in the food. And this is going to be a process, okay? Because as you concentrate and do this through 3 or 4 or 5 incremental steps, you will eventually experience palate fatigue. And this is true of piano and basketball as well. You get tired at some point and you need a rest. Same thing with cooking. Okay, so this requires that you come back to the kitchen later in the day or the next day to continue that practice process and really pay attention to what the food presents naturally. Okay, and its taste and flavor makeup, texture is important as well, temperature as well. Your state of health, right, is also important. And then, how that food changes with the incremental addition of salt, right, and as it seems to be still undersalted. And then just as it starts to reach that pinnacle, right, of balance, you really want to start to understand that, but you only understand balance relative to imbalance. So going from under seasoned to just seasoned and then over seasoned, right? You need to kind of toggle back and forth across that pinnacle, that summit, that space there. So that's why it takes practice. That's why it takes engagement. And that's why it's going to take some time for you to go through, this experience. But that's what you do. All right. Thank you. Hello, Laura. Good day. How do you prevent lumps from forming when making a cashew white sauce and using a blend tech to blend the ingredients? What may cause those lumps? Well, let's see here. I use a blend tech here at home, and I will soak the nuts. And I will start out with a volume of product that is relatively small. Okay. And I'll try to blend it, until it's smooth in the smallest volume that I can. And then I can build up I can adjust the viscosity by building up the volume, by adding whatever flavorful liquid that I choose. And that's been successful for me. There are times when there may be a touch of graininess to the texture, but not much. If usually it doesn't bother me. I'm fine, with some of the beautiful irregularity that food presents in its natural form. If the context calls for an even smoother texture, I would strain it at that point, being careful to choose a strainer with the appropriate coarseness to the mesh so that I don't pull out too much of the goodness right in the nuts. So this leads me to another tangent, and I'm big on tangents because there's always something else to talk about. But in the kitchen, I'm thinking about professional kitchens, but in the kitchen generally, straining devices are all around us in different sizes and different coarsenesses, and that's because depending on what we're handling, whether it's a vegetable fiber or a grain from a cashew nut or something else, and depending on the audience and the occasion and what it is that we're making, that specific strainer becomes necessary. And so anyway, I've got a bunch of strainers at home, and so I'm always thinking about what sort of coarseness to the strainer is going to be appropriate to get the desired result for this given preparation. But anyway, that's a start. Now, when you use the word lump, I envision something bigger. And but I have a feeling it's probably something much smaller, really, right, Laura? Perhaps graininess. What causes that? Yeah, I don't know. If you soaked your cashews or other nuts, it's going to be some perhaps uneven absorption of water, or it's just something about the makeup of the nut. They've and all nuts are a little bit different too, right? From batch to batch, from place of origin to place of origin, from season to season. Just like people, right? They have their own personalities that develop. You want to think about whether some graininess left in the product is acceptable. In which case, just run it a little bit longer in the blend tech as well. Will get you a smoother texture, right? Or choose a strainer for a smoother finish. Thank you. All right. Another question here from Lynn. Hello. Can you suggest ingredients, herbs, and or staples to have on hand that can easily be turned into multicultural meals? In other words, batch cooking and having more than one meal choice by simply changing or adding herbs and seasoning. Well, I will start by directing you to some of these lessons in our courses, both FOK and Pro Plant. For example, probably in the Pro Cook course, we'll have some charts and some PDFs that have some suggestions on ingredients that generally profile a given region, a given regional flavor profile, at least at a high level, right? And certainly we can drill down to smaller and smaller areas of a given region and find some dispute with the Ruby lists. But I think as a starting point, they're good. Also, consider some of the many books that are available to us that address this broader topic of flavor development. Often these books will have a section on regional flavor profiles, such as a book called The Flavor Bible. There's also the Vegetarian Flavor Bible, in case that might interest you. But there are other books as well. Okay. As I think about our own, inventory here at home, when it comes to ingredients, I've got, there must be 4 or 5 or 6 varieties of dried chilies. We've got New Mexico's and some japonesas and costeños and a couple of others that aren't coming to mind, but they vary in color, intensity. They vary in heat intensity. I've got some chipotles that have some smokiness to them, and also they vary in the thickness of the meat, right, of the chili. So once they're soaked and blended, how much body will be lent to the sauce or whatever it is that I'm making. So those are all considerations when it comes to chilies, for example, that direct me toward usually Mexican cuisine, but it could be other regional cuisines that call for a chili of some sort. Not to mention my own hybrid cooking, right, where I just want a smoky element, and I like the fruitiness of chilies, although it really might reflect something like Japanese cooking, maybe not Japanese, okay, but just something that I make up along the way. Miso, right? I usually have some variety of white miso and a red miso, something light and something dark. There are many other variations to choose from. Outside of Japan, less so. You're bound to find 2 or 3 or 4 or 5 in your locality. But if you're in Japan, you'll find dozens and dozens of varieties of miso as you travel throughout the country. Herbs, I tend to work with fresh herbs. So there's, thyme and rosemary and sage and a couple of varieties of sage growing outside. I'll bring in lemongrass and kaffir lime. The first bunch of herbs kind of point me toward, Mediterranean, European, a lot of times North American sort of cooking. North American meaning American, U.S. cooking. Whereas lemongrass, kaffir lime, ginger, galangal takes me to Southeast Asia generally. Whether it's Vietnam or Cambodia or Indonesia, for example. Let's see here. Spices, we've got a bunch of spices. I think something like, black peppercorns. We've got turmeric, cloves, and mace and nutmeg, and black cardamom, green cardamom, cumin, coriander, and fenugreek in their whole form. I think I have some fenugreek powder left over as well from an earlier purchase. Those are a few of the staple flavors and ingredients that go into South Asian cooking, specifically the Indian cooking that we do here at home. And vinegar, right? Vinegars come in various and sundry flavors. Rice vinegar and raspberry vinegar, apple cider vinegar, red wine vinegar, white plain old distilled vinegar. Those are some common ones that I know we have in the inventory. And then occasionally some others, more specific items come through. Your choice of a sigilant might roll into citrus juices, whether it's lemon or lime or some type of an orange, bitter orange, a sweet orange that has some accompanying acidity. Tamarind is a wonderful souring agent, as well as kokum. And there are probably a couple others out there that I see from time to time. Okay. And so, those address the areas that I like to cook in. Mexico, Japan, India as a starting point. But also it sort of spills over into Korea and Southeast Asia and the occasional Euro-American dish as well. All right. And so, and think about, you talk about other staples. We've got garbanzo beans and kalachana. It's a darker variation of a chickpea that we see in South Asian cooking. I got some white soybeans, some black soybeans, some black-eyed peas, and I got some small white beans, sometimes called navy beans. Right now I don't, but occasionally I do have cannellinis that come through the house. Pintos, I got a bunch of pintos, and then we have other samples that come through. There are different types of black beans. I get a couple of different varieties from time to time. There are Christmas beans and turtle beans and things that I'll try out from time to time as well. And so, you can use a given bean across different cuisines. Right? Certainly one might characterize a given cuisine sort of at a high level, but don't be afraid to also switch gears and try, azuki beans in Mexican cooking, for example. The flavors and textures go very nicely with those flavor profiles. Okay. So anyway, that's a starting point that kind of gives you an idea of how I play in the kitchen, and also gives you some resources to do some research on your own. All right. Thank you. All right. Next up, I need to take a whole food plant-based cooking to a manageable level. How can we make sure we are serving tasty meals without spending hours in the kitchen? Aha. This is an awesome question, one that we get from time to time here. And the answer is practice. Practice makes better. Okay. And so when it comes to making tasty meals, that is entirely in the hands of the cook. All right. And when it comes to working faster in the kitchen, right, developing your skills that will allow you to prep faster, to cook faster, to finish faster, to plate faster, That is all about practice. Okay. And so repetition is very important. Cook as much as you can. Cook the same or similar preparations as much as you can, as well as different dishes, so that you can learn, right, about those ingredients, how they act and react when they're soaked, when they're exposed to heat, when they're chilled, when they're frozen, when they're thawed. And that's going to provide you with the insight that you need to know in order to make tasty meals in a time-efficient manner. Okay. Now, start with solid skill development and knowledge acquisition. And that's where the Ruby courses come into play, right? Whether it's forks over knives or professional plant certification course or something else that you might choose, really engage with each lesson. Practice it multiple times until you understand the basics, and then continue cooking in order to understand the nuances, okay, of what that particular lesson or that subject area presents. Okay. At Ruby, we are here to get you going in the kitchen, right? Through our courses and through our live events, through our question and answer process, the function that we have available to our students. And like any other education, whether it's in law or medicine or piano or something else, it's your experience after your education, right? That accumulation of experience that will continue to inform your practice and make you better and more efficient in the kitchen. Okay, so please have patience and enjoy the process. Thank you. All right, from Angelique. What do you recommend for stainless steel pots and pans? So I think what you're asking is for a brand recommendation, right? Rather than maybe what I recommend for cleaning stainless steel. Okay. I can talk about that too. But, in terms of let's say a brand recommendation, let me talk a bit like I did with chef's knives earlier in today's program. Okay. And that is to say that there are, many different brands, as I'm sure you know, and many different price points. And it's going to depend upon your requirements. Okay. So for example, I have met many cooks that have the requirement of showing off well-known brands like All-Clad, and therefore it is important to them and acceptable to them to spend thousands of dollars on their cookware, and that's fine because All-Clad also functions well. If the show part of that is not important to you and you just want to get down and dirty in the kitchen, then you might consider a set of stainless steel cookware. And some suggestions that come to mind include the Kirkland brand at Costco, not their nonstick, but just their stainless steel cookware set. Hinkle has a stainless steel cookware set. IKEA has a stainless steel cookware set. And there are certainly there are others out there that aren't coming to mind right now, but those are three that are probably accessible for most people in terms of price. And I have experience on them. I wouldn't hesitate to use them, and therefore I don't hesitate to recommend them for consideration. And then you can move on from there. There's a lot Tramontina and so many others to consider. Okay. So hopefully that answers your questions on selecting stainless steel cookware. Let me also add another thing. When you look at a pan, you got the handle. Take a look at the attachment point. And very often it's riveted. It could be spot welded. Either way, it's fine. People will argue that riveted handles are going to be better because they're going to be more sturdy. Not necessarily. I've had riveted handles come loose, and I've been, cooking with some spot welded handles for literally decades. So it just depends on the product. Okay, but I recommend, this is what I do. Don't tell the store clerks about this, but I'll grab the handle just where it attaches to the pan, and see just how sturdy it is. Some of them, they bend pretty easily, and I just put that down and I walk away. And if it's pretty sturdy there, then it gives me a sense that the overall construction, right, in terms of the quality of the material, right, the gauge of the metal, as well as again how things are put together, is probably at a level that would satisfy me. Okay, so just one of those little tests that I do and recommend others to do as well. All right, thank you. All right, next question. I'd like to know if I can attend Ruby for the completion of my culinary studies and become nationally certified as a chef. I am currently a culinary student at my local community college. I am also a student here at Ruby. Let me answer this in a couple of ways. Okay, I'll first say that all of our courses are recognized by the American Culinary Federation, as well as the World Chefs Organization, right? Certainly our longer courses are. However, on the ACF side, they are recognized for continuing education hours. On the World Chef side, we've got a short list of our longer courses that will get you into the lowest level of certification, right? And that is very often the COME level. Now, you've got tangled into this question, your culinary studies at another institution as well. And I think in order to perhaps talk to understand and then to talk more clearly about what you've got going here, perhaps you can send us this question, perhaps with a little bit more context, if there is more context, to support@ruby.com, and we can continue this conversation. All right, thank you. All right, another question from Philip. What are good resources for food entrepreneurs? Yes, I always like to mention score.org. Those are the folks that I mentioned a little bit earlier in today's program. They've got a lot of resources for starting a business. And, also, just do a search for starting a food business, and look specifically at a food business in terms of your search. Because there are a number of idiosyncrasies that are associated with the food business that you might not find in a different type of business, namely as it relates to the perishability of your inventory, as well as food safety concerns that are associated with the consumption of the products that we make. Okay, and so those are a couple of ideas for you, Philip. Thank you. And then another follow-up question here. How to not lose passion when pursuing a career in cooking? So, for me, it's all about engaging in these other allied interests that I have that intersect with cooking. Okay. You gotta also, I feel very strongly, you also need to have that overarching goal, right? Of why is it that you're pursuing a career in cooking? Is it, for example, to nourish people at a fundamental level? That's been a big one for me, right? It is to extend hospitality, is to take care of people, is to provide nourishment, to ensure a quality experience. And that overarching target of mine has really pulled me through some times that otherwise were very exhausting. And I can remember times in kitchens at some hours past midnight when I was tourneing carrots for the event the next day, and thinking about everyone else that was at home and sleeping, and knowing that I had to be back in the kitchen at 7 a.m. right, to set up for breakfast and get things going. And those are some difficult times, and those are times that having that overarching sort of vision will carry you through that. I mean, otherwise you start to ask you a question, those negative questions like, why am I doing this? What benefit is this to me, right? Tourneing 1,000 carrots at 1 a.m. You can chalk it up to character building. I don't know, but there's also taking care of people, providing hospitality, a good experience, nourishing people. All those things that are very important to me. So what is it, Philip, that's important to you? Think about those overarching goals that you have that will never tarnish, that will never fade. And then also do other things, engage in other activities that are associated, with cooking. So for me, it's travel. For me, it's taking cooking classes. Yes, I take cooking classes, and I do it for entertainment. I love to cook. I love to interact with other people, and I love to do it in other settings when I'm not the teacher. And I also will find things to learn. I mean, there's always something to learn when I'm studying Ethiopian cooking at the local community college, right? Or Japanese cooking through an online school, or something else, right? There's food styling, even at the most basic level, when it comes to taking photographs of the food that I prepare. And, it's looking at the basics of shadows and lighting and the service ware that I choose to create color contrast and a richer background. I'm not a photographer, but I have just enough interest in all those things, especially in the context of food, that keeps that fire going. Okay. I talked about Ayurveda earlier, with another student. I think it was Ida in today's program. Ayurveda is a passionate area of mine, as it as a modality of healing and wellness. But there's a subcategory, and that is cooking. And I've studied it and I've taught it, and have a great time sort of going there from time to time as I need to keep things interesting and exciting and new for me. So find those different areas of your own life that you can dabble in to keep cooking fresh. All right, thank you. All right, we got next question here from Louis, or it could be Louie. I'm not sure. Okay, but I appreciate that you're asking the question. I just joined 2 weeks ago the Plant-Based Pro course. My question is for mise en place. Can I use a container for my spices in my pictures? And can my small bowls where I place my chopped vegetables be red? Yeah, I mean, my quick question is yes. Okay. Let's see. Let's break this down for you. So can I use containers for my spices? So I'm reading this in two ways. And number one is, can I put out a container of black pepper, for example? Quick answer is yes. Okay, I think that the better answer is that if the recipe calls for a tablespoon of black pepper, that you're measuring that out and putting it into a separate container, even if it is red. Okay, hopefully that answers your question. All right, and then in terms of the color of the containers, red is not a big deal for me in the mise en place picture. So long as we can clearly see what's in the bowl. Okay, so if you have red ingredients in the red bowl, then it could be a concern, because we need to clearly see what it is that you're presenting. Okay, so you might consider creating some contrast. Okay, and I'm going to take this moment here and also talk about your final presentation. okay, where we request students to use white serviceware. And I realize you're not asking this question, but it is a question that often comes up, and it's very important in the scoring and critiquing of your final dish. White serviceware, in most all occasions, provides a plain background, allowing your food to be highlighted, and providing the color contrast, etc., for us to best see that food item. And so that's why we strongly suggest that you use white serviceware. But otherwise, I think you're fine with your mise en place suggestions here. All right. Thank you very much. And look at this. Laura's back. You're welcome. Again, I always appreciate your participation here. And so Laura says, thank you, and thanks to all my fellow students for all the great questions. I learned a lot from this and other previous Q&A events. Again, thank you so much. It's always good to see you, Laura. And the next one from Randy. If the recipe says to split the green beans, make them thinner, do you strip the beans out or leave them in the green beans? I guess it depends on the preparation here. So there are certainly times, depending on the type of bean and pod, where we're popping, the inner bean out and just using that, such as with fresh garbanzos. But there are other times in the usual green bean scenario, as you're asking about here, when the pod is also edible, in which case we would just cut straight through the pod and cut that down to the necessary size, and then just sort of use the whole thing that's left over. And sometimes we cut through the inner bean. Sometimes part of it falls out, so sometimes it stays in, and that's typically fine. Okay? I hope that answers your question. Thank you. All right, another question here from Audi. I want to let you know that I am super excited taking the FOK course. The practice recipes are delicious, and I share with my husband what I am learning. Now, before he cooks, he does the mise en place. That's awesome. Okay. First of all, I'm so happy to hear that you're enjoying the course. I've seen a number of your assignments come through, and you're doing a great job. And keep up your good work, your good practice. And yes, I am so happy to hear that you have, enlisted the help of your spouse in the kitchen. To do the mise en place. It sounds like you're the executive chef, and you've got a sous chef working under your wings. And I hope others will, take note, whether it's a spouse or a child, right? Bring the family into the kitchen. And I think it makes, the bigger picture of cooking all the more meaningful. All right. Thank you so much. All right. Laura is writing. I'm not very familiar with the concept of reduction yet. Can you please clarify that for me? What does exactly reduce mean, and how and when do you do that? So, to reduce very simply means to drive off water through simmering, right? It could be boiling, but usually it's going to be simmering, something at a moderately gentle temperature. Okay. And by doing so, we concentrate what's left. We concentrate the color, the flavor, the aroma, and the texture. In other words, the viscosity will get a little bit thicker, and it can get quite thick depending on just how much reduction takes place and what else is in that liquid. Okay. So, when do you do that? I mean, you do it whenever you want to concentrate those characteristics that I just mentioned. This is one of those techniques, right, that is going to be in your toolkit, so to speak, and you can employ. It can be, reducing a balsamic vinegar, right, to make a balsamic glaze. It can be the reduction of um, a mushroom liquor, right, or a mushroom jus to concentrate the flavors, okay, for that finishing element for a sauce or a soup or some other liquid medium. All right. And you talk about how to do that. So again, work with at moderate temperature, and sometimes it's even a little bit more gentle than that. And take the time that's necessary. One of the risks of reduction is burning, okay, because of a couple of factors. Often there's sugar in the foods that we're reducing, and or there's going to be some of the constituents that are in the food, little food particles, and those elements will burn relatively easily. So we want to do the reduction at a gentle temperature, and as it gets more concentrated, we want to drop the temperature further because the chances of scorching increase as those sugars and other constituents concentrate. Okay. Also, as the volume decreases, shift it to an appropriately smaller pan size. So in other words, if you're starting out with a large pan and that volume decreases, there's a lot of surface area and quick evaporation. So get that now smaller volume and put it into a smaller pan so it becomes deeper in that pan. And then you have more control over the time and temperature elements of this cooking technique. Okay, and give it a try and taste it along the way. Reserve the addition of salt until the end of the process, because otherwise the salt will concentrate and you may end up with something that is too salty for your palate. Okay, so keep those basics in mind and give it a try. Thank you. All right, another one from Audi. Task 97 states, in FOK eating plan, tofu and tempeh are used rarely and sparingly. And why? Well, let's see here. I'm trying to recall what the preferences might be of the physicians that advise the Forks Over Knives team. Okay. And this is a chance where I should probably mention that the Forks Over Knives team is different from the Ruby team. Okay. And so some of the items that are specific to FOK come from their medical advisory board. And I don't always have, I'm not always privy to those details, but I think it has to do with very simply eating a balanced diet, right? Both the tofu and the tempeh that you mentioned are soybean based, and not that there's anything inherently wrong with soybeans, but one thing that I've seen over the years and continue to see from time to time is that for folks that are transitioning to a plant-based diet, they sometimes will rely too much on soy-based products. And that imbalance over time is not a good thing. And, we think about tofu and tempeh because they're soybean based. They've got the full array of amino acids in terms of protein production in the body. Those are often sort of go-to. They become, go-to ingredients or the first thing that people think about in order to satisfy their protein requirements. Maintain balance, right, in your bigger picture of consumption, and eat a wide variety of products, including soy products, if so long as there isn't a food allergy that's involved. Certainly enjoy tofu, enjoy the tempeh dish, but also balance that with other legumes and the other array of vegetables and grains and all the other beautiful flavorings that go along, with the world of cooking. Okay. Sparingly, again, I'm not privy to what the FOK Medical Advisory Board might have been thinking or discussing when they chose those words. That certainly we're using in our course, but we received some advice from FOK. And I say I'm not sure what they mean by sparingly, because there are certainly populations in this world, right, such as the Japanese or the Koreans, that may consume tofu on a daily basis, but it's in conjunction with a lot of other foods. So in those contexts, I wouldn't characterize tofu as being eaten sparingly, but I would characterize it as being consumed in a balanced context. Okay, so I hope this helps understand the broader picture. Thank you. All right, Catherine, thank you so much. And I appreciate your participation today and in making, this office hours what it is today and what it is each time that I am online with all of you. So I really appreciate your engagement in the Ruby courses, as well as today's event. Thank you. And Mackenzie is asking, what do you think is the most challenging part of the plant-based pro certificate? Having gone through that course myself, I would say it is just maintaining the pace. It's a 6-month course, and it really requires your engagement every week along the way. You can take a day off here or there, Mackenzie, but we do want you to stay engaged. It involves a lot of cooking, a lot of planning, a lot of reading, a lot of studying, a lot of review, and but also a lot of enjoyment along the way, right? You're cooking for friends and family, and certainly, hopefully, you are, right? Because there's a lot of food that will be produced. But that's the biggest thing, right? And then also, understand that, that course delves into a number of different subject areas. And so you'll be on the hunt for particular ingredients to play with, whether it's agar or, something else, right? And it could be equipment. If you want to take advantage of the full experience, right, of spherification or something else. It might have you mail ordering or hunting down specific ingredients or utensils or equipment. Okay, but again, you have a choice, right, as to just how deep and how much you want to get into a certain subject area. Okay, but do take a look at the table of contents to see how things appeal to you, and then go forth. Okay, but enjoy the journey. Okay, and this brings us to the conclusion of my office hours today. And as always, I appreciate your participation, your attendance today, and hope you enjoy the conversation as I always do. And until we meet next time, enjoy the cooking. Thank you. Bye-bye.